Arvind, I've been going through your profile and reading about what all you have done, and I'm very excited to be talking to you. Tell us about your journey and the lens with which you look at product here in Visa.
I think in terms of the journey, it just happened by a chance that I got into payments after my MBA in Canada, and I got into a payments company. Started with a marketing analyst and tried different things and landed in products. And I liked products so much that I've never left products. So I've changed industries. I've gone into consulting. I spent some time at Deloitte, joined another payments company in the US. But I love the industry just given the amount of dynamism it has. There's not a moment of getting bored in this industry, and you know that you're creating stuff which has impact in how people transact with money. So to me, that was very empowering. And across different roles I've had in industry or consulting, I've swung between the product development and the management and partnerships. And what is unique about Visa's role in India and South Asia is that my team is stretching across developing new products, deploying global products, and managing partnerships. So it gives a good swath of exposure and impact that we can make. To give you an example, like from building products just for India in India, like we announced Visa SafeClick, that's an amazing exercise in new product development, starting with business requirements, solution concepting, and MVP, and then general availability launches, to something which we would roll out like tokenization, which is a massive global product which we are deploying with partners in India. So level of breadth and depth is what makes it exciting, I guess.
How do you take that and build your products?
Globally, we see roughly around $18 trillion of flow happening on cash and checks on retail payments. 18 trillion, right? But that's consumer payment retail. You look at the B2B, the government payment flows, that's globally a $185 trillion opportunity. Wow. That's not digitized yet, right? And digitization is not meaning that they have to be carded, but they're just still running on check and cash. So that's the global opportunity. India actually mimics that global scale, right? In India, we are still at 90% cash and check of the entire PC or personal consumption expenditure. So the opportunity to digitize those payment flows is immense. But interestingly, in India also what's happening is as more and more people get to e-com and use e-com, I think it's creating expectations which are very similar to what people in developed countries are having. That, hey, I want better experience. I want less friction on e-com. So what we are also seeing is that how do we not just provide access to digital, but also improve experiences as people are going into the e-com world, and a lot of new products that we are rolling out in that area, right? The third, I think, is the aspect of a lot of people want affordability, right? So it's very important that as they're purchasing, can they stretch their wallet a little more? And in India, given the big gap of credit access, what you have is 55 million credit cards, and you probably have heard those stats of 800 million debit cards, but there's still 200 million credit eligible customers who are not getting credit at point of sale. So I think that's another area of focus. If you're purchasing something at the point of sale, online or offline, how can we render you some kind of an installment or a buy now, pay later type of a construct? That again, I think all of these initiatives are pushing more penetration in consumer payment flows. In the B2B, that is a greenfield opportunity, honestly. I think we've seen a great success in our commercial payments. We're just scratching the surface because there's still, in Asia Pacific, there's $17 trillion of payment flows which are yet to be digitized in new payment flows. 17 trillion in Asia Pacific alone, right? And in consumer payments, that's 6 trillion of cash and check, right? So it's 3x, right? Or nearly 3x, right? Consumer payment, of course, and payments, everyone is focused on that because it's much more fungible and we get it. But I think the bigger and bigger opportunity is going to be also in getting these SMEs to be more, like basically digitizing the entire supply chain and managing T&E to receivables and payables, automation, and all digitally. So I think those are 3 or 4 areas of interest for us.
How is Visa engaging with this community, and how are you involved with this community?
So, it's honestly been a journey for us, especially more active journey in the last 4 years. What we started off with was first opening up our VisaNet services through APIs. So we rolled out this program called Visa Developer Platform. Any fintech can go and access sandbox environment and start playing with the APIs with a simple sign up. No contracting needed to play around with APIs. That in itself was very empowering to engage with fintechs, right? So opening up ourselves to APIs. And just to give you context, we do 1 billion API calls are fired to Visa servers every month.
Wow.
So we are not talking small numbers globally. That's how big the scale of APIs is for Visa. So that was the start. Like in India, can we launch a program to engage fintechs? This was 3 years ago. Then the following year, what we did was we created a program called Visa Ready Program. What it does is, so a lot of fintechs in India, they're driving monthly active user growth in India, but ARPU is not coming from here, right? So they also have these global ambitions to go abroad, use the same stack to another neighboring country or go to US or UK. Visa Ready Platform allows them to credentialize themselves by being on a stage that Visa can introduce to partners globally, right? So we kind of a certified program, like we certify their solution, we certify them as a partner, gives more confidence to issuers outside of India or partners outside of India to engage with them. So that was interesting. So I think we started to build a bit of a momentum there. And then the subsequent year, we rolled out this thing called Fintech Fast Track. So what happens is you like the API, you like being promoted outside of India or even in India with big banks, but you still want to get started with Visa, right? And that process used to be long. It wasn't easy in how the licensing works, the contracting and everything. We changed that 6-month process down to 2 months, and we're aiming to do it in weeks now, right? So not only is faster to onboard on Visa services, but also what we are doing is giving a bunch of incentives. So if you hit certain triggers, like we'll waive off, certain costs to operate as a fintech, as an incentive for you to get up and running quickly, and so the cost is not an inhibitor. And then this was the fourth one. So this year when we launched Visa Everywhere initiative is like, okay, we build the assets. Now we have to do an outreach to fintech. So we have to get the word out that we are here, and these are so many things for us to work together with you. So honestly, it's been a journey. This is capping that journey with partnership with your team and a bunch of fintechs. We've got like 450 fintechs have applied to a bunch of 3 problem statements we had as challenge statements. And response has been great. Like we had 90 of them shortlisted for pitches. 40 of them have been shortlisted of those 90. And we're going to bring top 10 to do the final pitches at the event we're going to have in the next couple of months.
Have you seen the impact of this engagement, or is it early right now?
So, there are fintechs who are live with us. Clearly, right? So an example would be NeoCard. An example would be like FPL Labs. Like the bunch of these partners who are actually seeing the infrastructure, the assets, the capabilities, and the scale that we have. Neo is a perfect example. Like it's a travel prepaid proposition. So I think some of these programs, like we were not waiting for Visa Everywhere initiative to kick off. A lot of the fintech engagement has been going on for the last 4 or 5 years. So clearly, I think there's been a lot of active fintech partners in prepaid space, in neo debit space, alt lending space. As an example, we're working with fintechs to furnish or enable installments at point of sale. So what does that mean is that we are providing a rail for banks to connect with the borrowers, and fintechs are giving that customer experience layer to make it much more transparent for the installment terms, which is very opaque sometimes and hard to make sense of. So I think some of this is like partnerships we are stitching between the banks, providing our rails, and then enabling installments through these partners. So so it's not starting. I think it's active. I think we want to scale it up. That's the goal of this program.
Some of the things that you're building, are they being built here, or are they being built outside and coming to the Indian market?
Great question. I think so most of the time people have perception that Visa is in India is probably deploying what is being built in the US.
Yes.
And it's
I also have that perception.
exactly. So I think we're changing that.
Okay.
We want to change that perception. And in the last 2 years, we've done real work and deliberately we are focusing on market first products. What I mean by that? So see, in a scale at which we operate, product organizations are generally centralized, right?
Yeah.
Because you build and you push out that product to deploy in 160 countries we operate in. It's a good model to scale. And tokenization is a classic example. That's how we will scale, because you need standardization, you need scale to drive interoperability, security, and so on. India is a unique market. When we've tried to push global products to India, what we found is that Indian consumer is more demanding in certain ways, but it's also more accommodating with some of the friction that exists. If you give the value to the customer, they're okay with 10 steps sometimes. And there's always been OTP as a legacy, right?
Yeah.
And that friction, people have gotten used to seeing it as a more secure way of doing things. So what we have done in the last couple of years is two things. One, we've addressed two areas. One is friction in e-com. So that's the first bucket. We said, okay, how do we improve e-com experience on cards? Because people are opting for other alternate methods because the experience in card is bad. All right, so we built a product which was called Visa SafeClick. Basically, it's very simple. Your existing card on file, Visa card on file on any of the platforms like Flipkart, for example, could be enrolled into an experience where you have no OTP under 2,000 rupees. And we still do authentication and background and device validation and everything, but we don't cause unneeded friction if you're coming from known device, known merchant, and so on. But the idea of the Visa SafeClick is just not to solve for less than 2,000. What we are also doing is for above 2,000, the 3D secure experience makes you go through the hops. So we're trying to make it much more native, that you don't have to go through these hops of different pages. How can we render a simple OTP experience within the app? So some of this is what we're seeing early days, but we're seeing improvement in payment success rate by 8 to 10% points. Wow. That's huge. Just imagine how much more sales conversions merchants can do if payment success rates improve. And then the other area we've tried to tackle on is credit access. And that's where the installment comes in. So we announced a partnership through BillDesk for both standing instructions and installment solutions. We're building with them and other partners in the ecosystem to help issuers extend credit at point of sale and have merchants leverage that ability for their customers to be able to get instant credit provision at the checkout page. And it's very powerful if you think of these are people who don't have a credit card. So they have a debit card, but they're being pre-approved or they're made eligible for a certain amount of credit and provision at a point of sale. It's the moment of truth, right? When you're buying something, instead of getting a credit 2 months ago and then you have to remember, I have a credit, should I use it or not? It's when you need it, you get it. So I think some of those experiences hopefully will push the envelope, and those are examples, right? How we are doing it. And then one last thing is, what we're finding is the partners in India are operating at a scale which actually makes sense for us to do more bespoke solutioning. So that's also another interesting thing where we are working with the Bangalore Tech Center to build bespoke, fit-for-purpose solutions for large partners, right? And this is around solving for experience, solving for access, solving for more security, right? I think some of this is Visa has really become much more modular from a product organization perspective to build more products regionally or in markets. So that's a major shift. And I don't think any of our competitors have been able to pull this off because it's hard to manage both the centralization of scale and still give flexibility to make things more modularly or flexibly in the markets.
Just wanted to understand, are you going to be partnering or are you also going to be helping banks to make their experience easy? What are you thinking about this?
So honestly, neobanks are not new anymore. It's been now they're actually very well funded, very well. The founders are so experienced. They're not a bunch of garage startup guys, right? It has gotten maturity in the bench that these guys are bringing to stand up these companies. Second, I think it's logical, right? So banks, when we talk to our issuers, most of them want to partner with fintechs because they're also getting tired of building layers of modern tech API stacks on their core legacy core banking system, right? So what they're saying is that, okay, maybe I'll give a problem for you to solve for fintech and for a lot of new bankings like customer acquisition or manage their debit experience and so on. If you do that well, and I manage the back-end deposit, the regulation, all the risk and infrastructure, it's a win-win, right? And I think that's happening, and that's positive because I think what fintechs, I tell my fintech friends, like they have to learn that not everything has to be built by you. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? Every fintech founder feels like they're the first one to doing this. They're not the first one to doing it.
But then banks also these days feel that they have to do everything.
That's another, yeah. So it's a bit of yin and yang. I think you have to pull and push both sides. But I think leading banks and leading fintech founders, I think they've gotten this understanding that there is a real partnership. It's not a forced partnership. And I think globally we are seeing it. A lot of neobanks at scale are working with large banks globally to solve for customer experience issue, new acquisition issue, lower cost of acceptance issue. And they're like early days, how that shapes out in India. But we are actively partnering with neobanks. And I think it's an area of excitement for us because some of these guys are going to solve for real problems that banks have.
What do you think of UPI as Visa?
So it's another alternate rail, right? And I think Visa, we have our own real-time payments rail called Push Payments, Visa Direct. UPI has been an enormous story, right? Like it's given access and probably, hopefully, brought more people into the digital fold than ever before, which is positive, right? We also feel that as people engage more digitally through UPI and other modes, I think they'll graduate to experimenting other modes of payments logically. Like that just happens by itself. But I think net, I think it's a positive. More people are getting into digital payments, so it can't be a bad thing. Other networks are also alternate rails, right? So UPI, if you think of the way they've structured, this is an alternate rail, a great experience and whatnot. And the reach is of course bigger than ours because they're into every account. We don't solve every account. But here's the thing, right? Like every rail has its role to play. UPI is a big P2P play. They're getting into P2M. If you look at scale on P2M, merchant payments, and which comes with a lot of infrastructure on disputes, chargeback management, fraud and security, 5-9 stability. There's no network across the world which can give you 5 nines on availability of infrastructure. If you make sometimes UPI payments, they time out, right? And so they're going through the teething issues as a network. They'll get through that eventually. But I think the market is so big, Shraddha. I think if you look at opportunity to play and win, there's 90% of PCE still waiting for, right? And I think the general thesis at which we operate at Visa, when you are a market leader, which we are in this market, the goal is not to protect the market share. The goal is actually to grow the market, right? And I think you'll hear that from every leader you'll talk to. And I think this is not just India, but even globally. That's why we're talking about how do we get to new payment flows. Like, it's one thing to just keep protecting what we have, but it's like when you know the opportunity is so massive in digitizing. So clearly we aren't looking back.
How do you look at security? How do you build that into whatever you do here in Visa?
So at a global scale, like we have a multi-layered security apparatus, right? Like so you have layers of security being built from policies and frameworks like disputes and chargebacks systems that we have. So that's more policy oriented. Then you have technologies like tokenization. Then you have technologies like authentication. So I think what we've done is for range of frauds and range of channels that fraud can erupt, we've built multi-layered modes of security, so to speak, right? So security is everything for us. Like we won't exist if we were to have a range of security incidents that a fintech can get away with, right? So clearly I think it's sacrosanct. It's very, very tightly managed, and I think there's a whole global infrastructure and teams around 24/7 ensuring that we are not being attacked by various cyber fraud gangs and whatnot. But I think from an India perspective, it's core, right? Every product we launch, the first rule of thumb is like from a security perspective, is it secure enough? Over and above, of course, we have to manage to the laws of the land, to the regulation. We actually go over and above. Like that's how Visa operates. Like we also scope out what are the things that could go wrong that we aren't being asked for today, but we should think of because in other markets we've learned something. So I can't underestimate, I can't overstate the importance of this. And that's why every product we build, whether it's tokenization or Visa Safe Click, security is the core of it, right? Like tokenization, it took us a couple of years to get the regulator across. But then also, once the regulator gave us a green signal, we are ensuring that the ecosystem is fully ready and all locked and loaded with full security that's needed to launch a product like of this kind in India.
Visa as a name stands for trust, credibility. I was just thinking, how much does a good product experience lead to this thinking?
No, I think it's a mix of, like trust. Trust comes with time. Yeah. Like I say, it is always, of course, we've been in the business for more than 60 years. But you're also right, it's just not a product. It's a bit of this is marketing, a bit of this is partnership and relationships. Here's the thing, right? Like security is table stakes. Yeah, if you break security, trust will go away. Yeah. But just because you have security doesn't mean that's enough for trust. Yeah. So if you look at our brand index that we measure, Visa is the most trusted brand in payments globally. Yeah. Visa is the most well-admired companies to work for, most preferred brand when it comes to payments and so on. That trust has been built over time through how we have engaged with our customers and merchants and issuers. From a product perspective, of course, the goal is that we aren't breaking the trust by compromising on security. So, of course, there's a bit of a balancing act of how can I improve my experience without compromising trust or security. So, but I think it's not also in loggerheads all the time. I think there is a way to balance it, and we are doing that in every product we do. Like there is a balance of, whether it's secure remote commerce, whether it's Visa Safe Click, whether it's installments, we're constantly balancing experience with security.
How are you seeing the space evolve, and what is exciting for you?
So I think three or four big chunks of changes that has happened in the last 5 years, I would say. One, I would say the ecosystem of like a 4-party model has really expanded to include more parties in the ecosystem. Right? So the traditionally 4-party network model has more participants of fintechs, enablers, wallets participating in this, right? So that's new. Because previously, for example, wallets were closed loop. They just operated on their own. They're opening up globally, from Paytm to Gojek. There are many countries where this trend is already happening, where these 1 billion closed loop credentials will open up and are already opening up because of synergies of acceptance and consumer experience and so on. So that's one big trend, right? Like the other one I think is beyond the ecosystem getting expanded is that the market itself, or the addressable market, is still expanding. Yeah. Right. So it's so interesting that cash has increased. Cash from 2016 to 2019 globally has increased from, I think it was 15 trillion. I think now it's close to 18 trillion in consumer payments. So like 3% growth, 3% CAGR. If you compare that to digital penetration of payments, that has increased 23% CAGR in the same period, right? So roughly, I think globally, it's around 18 to 19% penetration of all payments is through e-com channel. That's massive, right? Like, so that just tells you that e-com or the digital modes of channels are growing at a 7x, close to 7x than cash and check. So that's an important one. So I think this trend, if it continues, is a huge opportunity for everyone, right? The third thing I would say is access to credit. In India is unique, right? In India, I think that's a massive opportunity versus developed markets like US. In India, people either don't get credit cards, or they're also not comfortable with concept of revolving balances, right? And I think that's where new forms of credit might come in, and are already coming in, right? Like, so credit doesn't have to be traditional credit card. It could be new forms of credit, installments or buy now, pay later, and so on. So that's another one. And then finally, I think just in consumer payments, is this whole, we talked about neo-banking and alt-lending construct. They're getting much more real versus just hey, it's a trend. It's no more a trend, it's actually very real. So,
What has been personally and professionally been the most exciting part of being part of this ecosystem?
I think at a personal level, so when I moved back to India after 16 years, it was more for family reasons. So I thought that I'm making a compromise on my career to move from US back to India. I think I've been pleasantly surprised and shocked that how much of action and how much growth in payments in our industry is happening here. It wasn't visible to me from there, looking at things. It's been 2.5 years, and I think I've never had a dull moment. This market is going to shape how the rest of the world works in payments. So that to me is personally, started with a personal reason, but I think professionally it's been much more gratifying. And then how this market is shaping everything we do here, from a product perspective, I can tell you, becomes the best practice for other markets. Like some of these products we are talking about are being exported to other markets. And some of the things that how we operate as a team are being learned by other product teams in other markets for Visa. So to me, I would say that's a good trend, and Visa India is setting a benchmark for other markets for Visa.
What's the mindset you need to have to be a great product manager, a great product leader?
So, product management is actually, I feel, is a general management discipline. You have to do a bit of real creation of product development. You also have to do a bit of management. You have to do a bit of finance. You have to do a bit of selling. You have to do a bit of the whole 9 yards, right? I think it's a best training ground for someone who wants to learn full-on general management. In a country role like India, where we build product, we just don't build products, we deploy products, we sell them, we create a pipeline and so on. So I think the mindset is, in simple words, create, deploy, manage. But in doing so, you round up your skill set, round off your skill set to be a full-on general manager for your product area.
We've been hearing a lot about diversity and inclusion of women in the workforce. What is Visa doing to ensure that you have more women in the workforce?
So we have in every country the inclusion and diversity chapters. So in India, it's a pretty active chapter we have, where we have range of initiatives from the bench that we have, how much of diversity is in that bench, from our hiring process to retention policies, ensuring that the panels are well represented. For example, we have a 50-50 panel, has to be men and women in the panel. So that's not a skewed perspective on hiring. Hiring is such that the finalist candidate, there should be at least one diverse candidate for gender diversity. So I think just ensuring that as we're building the bench, that we do have full inclusion and diversity. And then every month, we have actually a full year calendar right now. I'm looking at Uma because we've got from social initiatives to wellness initiatives. It's a wellness month going on actually. So we had folks learning mindfulness practice. Wow. We had a coach come and tell us how to balance work and life. We were on Saturday out with Umang Foundation, painting walls in a small school in a rural Maharashtra. So there are a bunch of things which is just not gender diversity focused, it's also inclusion focused. So agenda is pretty broad, but of course heavily focused on this area.
Okay. I love talking to you.
Thank you, Shraddha.